I'd like to introduce Nkosinathi Biko, chairperson of this, Chief Executive of the Steve Biko Foundation.
That was, of course, the Chief Executive of YFM. Briefly, I was asked to welcome all of you and to explain just a bit why it is that we get together in this way. This is, of course, the Frank Talk Dialogue Series. It's part of a larger dialogue series at the foundation that we hold in partnership with various institutions. This particular one is in partnership with YFM. We are targeting the group between 25 and 40. I am not a member of that group. I have long been relegated. But the idea is to try and get young South Africans who regard themselves as professionals, and we use the term professional in a very inclusive sense, people who are serious about what they are doing, to be part of the dialogue about our country. And oftentimes I think we resign ourselves to reading headlines about our country and not being part of crafting those headlines. And so this series is aimed at getting those people to participate in the national discourse. And of course, tonight, I want to particularly thank Dr. Badar for giving us the inspiration for tonight's topic, which focuses on the issue of banishment and bannings. Now, he has just finished a book, which is published, available at the back, called The Forgotten People, which focuses on this category of activists, people who contributed to our democracy but tend to be lost when we tell the story of sacrifice in South Africa. It does, of course, also coincide with the banning of many institutions 35 years ago on October 19th, and hence the combination of the two. Now, lastly, the issue of banning that we talk about today may have a historic context. I think, though, it is not entirely lost in the contemporary setting. I think that there is a tendency in South Africa of othering each other and pushing many people outside of certain spaces. So for holding one set of political views, you may be pushed outside of certain spaces. And I think we need to be mindful of the contemporary relevance of the topic tonight. Thank you very much.
All right. And it is with that I welcome you to the second Frank Talk Radio Dialogues, an initiative by the Steve Biko Foundation with the aim to advance public education about the Bill of Rights by engaging with young professionals in national discourse. This evening's dialogue is supported by the Open Society Foundation of South Africa. I'm, of course, your host, Faith Mangop, and we're broadcasting live from YFM. Now, in commemoration of the 35th anniversary of the October 19th, 1977, actually, it is the most amazing thing, actually. And when you're going to speak about it, you get caught up, and your tongue gets caught up because it is Black Wednesday. And it is something that even it becomes so emotional, because this evening's dialogue will explore banning and banishment through the experiences of those who suffered this practice during apartheid. Now, if you would like to be part of this evening's discussions, do feel free to drop us an email, send us a tweet, or simply give us a call on 011 772 0992. I'm going to welcome my panelists. Thank you very much for joining me. I've got Mr. Kenny Rachidi, who is the former leader of banned organization, the Black People's Convention. I've also got Dr. Salim Kadat, who is the author of The Forgotten People, Political Banishment Under Apartheid. And I've also got Mrs. Ntsiki Sisulu Singapi, who is the granddaughter to Walter and Albertina Sisulu. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, and welcome to our second Frank Talk Radio Dialogues. And I think we should give them a round of applause for taking their time to come and speak to us. Now, I'd like us to start off with you, Mr. Rachidi. Tell us a little bit about your days as an activist and what led to your banning.
Very difficult. I don't know where to start, because my activism actually started very long ago when I was still at high school, but at least politically and really getting involved. I became the first deputy chair of Johannesburg Central Branch of the Black People's Convention.
We do have a mic for this thing, yes. It's okay, it's our second one, we'll be fine, yes.
That was in 1972.
Yes.
After BPC was formed. Then in 1973, a couple of our chaps who were leading the organization were actually banned. People like Chris Kodito, Seth Cooper, and I think he's around here. He was actually our PR in BPC. They were banned. And immediately they were banned, actually I had to take over the office as acting general secretary.
Yes. Until
I became the president of the organization. And I think until the last, because when it was banned, I was the president.
And the experience, the banning experience itself, could you kind of take us through that one?
Well, I was banned after being detained at Marabi for almost a year. We were kept there, and apparently Kruger felt we were too hot, and he wanted us to get cold a bit. So he took us there. Most of us were there for a year. And when we released, I was then banned for 5 years. I was confined to the magisterial district of Johannesburg. I was not supposed to have 2 people with me at a time. No, I couldn't be interviewed, I couldn't be quoted, I couldn't go to school, I couldn't go to any publishing house, and etc., etc. All those kind of restrictions where you can't actually, you just become, you have to be alone, even in the family. And that is actually what happened. Although, I mean, by then we were also getting used to the idea that we are getting banned, and we had to make a means of actually making the banning life a normal life.
Yes.
So we never recognized the banning, and we thought we're not going to police ourselves, and that is the only way we could survive. So wherever possible, we had to make sure we break the banning order. But if you are arrested, you will obviously be sentenced.
Before we actually talk about living, as you speak about the banned life, before we get into that living the banned life, Dr. Bedard is an author of the book on banning and banishment entitled The Forgotten People, Political Banishment Under Apartheid. Could you kindly explain to us what banishment is? Is there a difference in these terms? I believe yours is just on naturally.
One of the things this book tries to do is it tries to tease out different weapons that were used under colonialism and apartheid to intimidate, to control, to marginalize, and to punish political opponents of tyranny and economic exploitation. And unfortunately, the longer we go on, these distinctions between murder and assassination is quite clear. But the distinctions between detention, banning, deportation, banishment, banishment, as I call it, these distinctions are being lost. And it's quite important to be clear that these were very different practices, and that these were many different weapons that was used by the colonial and apartheid governments to deal with political opponents. So when it comes to banishment, we're talking about a practice that exists under the Native Administration Act of 1927, in terms of which key and mainly rural people were plucked from their homes and were expelled. No process of court, no discussions about it, were expelled to usually desolate, remote, inhospitable areas of South Africa. So in 1950, Chieftainess Makwena Matlala is banished from Gwamatlala, 1,200 kilometers away to King Williamstown, and that's where she stays in banishment for 15 years. Theophilus Shangela, one of the militants in the Pondo Land uprising, is banished in 1960 from Bizana to Frenchdale Banishment Camp, which is about 90 kilometers from Bafokeng. He dies in banishment in 1974. Refuses to leave banishment, in fact, in 1972. Because as he said, I want to be unbanned and sent into freedom.
Yes.
So we can give many examples of people who were banished for long periods. On average, 5 years, but people served up to 20 years. Of the 160 people that were banished, 150 men, 110 women, 17 people actually died in banishment. So banishment is quite different from banning. When you were banned, you were restricted to your home. In the same way that Mr. Rashidi is speaking about, under certain conditions. In the case of banishment, you were taken from your home and you were banished 1,500 kilometers away, usually to an area where you didn't speak the language. So Ben Barton was taken from Worcester in 1959 and banished 1,600 kilometers to Ingwavuma, to an area where he didn't speak the language.
Yes.
So that's a fundamental distinction between banning, and detention, and banishment.
As we unpack the subject further, Ms. Susulu, you were born and raised in a politically active family, and many of our relatives, in fact, were Pan. Can you tell us a bit about what it's like to have a family member and to have family members who have been banned, but also the impact as you, as a daughter growing up and a granddaughter growing up within that environment?
Perhaps let me start where I hope to end, which is the interview that Dr. Walter Sisulu had in 1954 with George Hauser, where you were saying, I'm banned from being a member of the ANC, and I'm banned from the South African Indian Congress, and I'm banned from even attending a funeral. And then he continues to say, I was arrested at a dinner table because I was at a gathering. Something that we would take for granted today. Of course, in 1964, Gogo Bettina Sisulu was then banned for 5 years, and then was renewed every 5 years until 1989, which came to about a total of 17 years of her being banned. So that was our life. You know, so when we were born in the 70s, that's all we knew. And of course, later on, it was one generation after the other, because then it became Uncle Zolake, who was banned, and of course, you know, Antlintje and Uncle Matsu then obviously went into exile. But that, perhaps if there is ever a silver lining in that, is that the only time we were able to gather at the house was during birthdays. 21st of October was very special to Gogo, and we all gathered. And that's a tradition we've kept as a family ever since. And so it's all we knew.
Now, you know, Mr. Rashidi, when we're speaking about it, because we want to bring it into modern terms, this is where I would like to even pose a question to you as a listener, because if you remember, last year in November, a group of people dressed in black protested against the controversial Protection of State of Information Bill outside the headquarters of the ANC in Johannesburg. It named the campaign Black Tuesday. Now, based on what became known as Black Wednesday, what they were saying. Now, according to the ANC Chief Whip, Batole Motshekga, called it a dilution, in fact, of history. And however, based on the definitions we've been given this evening, in fact, I'm going to pose this out to you as a listener. Do you feel that that protest was justifiable? Give me your opinion on 011 772 0992. They based it, and they called it Black Tuesday, basing it on the events of Black Wednesday. Do you believe that those protests were justifiable? And what do we say, and as a young person, when we're looking at 21st century banishment, are we at a point where we can, in fact, experience 21st century banishment? Give me your thoughts on that one, 011 772 0992. Now, as I was saying, Mr. Rashidi, when we're looking at contemporary examples of banning and banishment and restricting, you know, community restrictions of communities as well as operations for individuals and organization, let's talk about freedom of expression, which is the term right now that is being used extensively. So we look at the contemporary examples, but of course, right now we're looking at freedom of expression as the contemporary example, or the what stems out of this modern or contemporary banishment.
Well, I'm not very certain.
I think we should have just given you my mic.
Yeah,
yes, it would make life so much easier for us.
I keep on forgetting, and it really disrupts me.
It's okay.
Well, we're talking about contemporary banishments, which I don't think I'm in a position to try and equate them or even, you know, compare them with the kind of bannings that the experiences that we had during that time.
Yes.
Because like Ms. Sulu was saying that you know, it really affects life, and it affects family life too. Can you imagine that when you have an occasion at home, and when some cousins or some uncles are coming in, you must actually be in a corner, or you must actually be in a room, you know, where you are not actually mixing with other people because you are banned. And it also doesn't make sense because you are not really banned because you were actually having some influential effect on the family. They believe you're actually influencing the nation, but now you're with the family, and you can't actually be with the family, you know. So I think to me, it really does affect lives, and it also depends in terms of, are you in a position to actually manage that kind of situation? And if you can manage it, then probably it becomes a bit better. And that is why I was actually saying that to us, we actually resolved that we are not going to police ourselves. And if somebody bans me, that means he's trying to put me in prison in my house, then he must actually come into my house and be a policeman in my house. I'm not going to police myself in my house. And that's actually what I think I can contribute in terms of that kind of situation.